So everyone, welcome to the Cleveland Developer Group. Today's presentation is Wordle in a Flow. We welcome Doug Burkhart from Centric Consulting. Doug's a Salesforce consultant and a solution architect. They're at Concentric. He's been in the ecosystem at least 9 years and has 8 certifications. Really knows Sales and Service Cloud, and we're excited to have him this morning present about Wordle in a Flow. I was lucky enough to see his presentation previously at Buckeye Dreaming, and while it's not something you're necessarily going to put into your Salesforce org where you work, it is a great way to learn by doing something fun. So I'm going to stop sharing and let Doug take over. Doug, whenever you're ready.
Yep. I'm just waiting for, there we go. All right. Well, thank you for the introduction, Linda. Is everybody seeing my screen still?
Yep.
Perfect. So as Linda mentioned, my name is Doug Burkhart. I'm a solution architect with Centric Consulting. I've been in the Salesforce space for a little over 9 years now. I've been at Centric for about 5. I'm again, an architect by nature, so typically not heavily involved in development, but we did extend some functionality into Flow with some development here in the Wordle game that we built. So excited to demo this for you today. To give a bit more background on why we initially built this, because as Linda mentioned, it's probably not a great use case for something you would necessarily put in your org. But we built this about 1.5 years ago because at Centric, we're a national consulting firm. So we were fully remote, and we had gotten together for one of our company meetings, which we do twice a year. And we're just presenting on our Salesforce practice and what we're doing and what we've been working on. So we wanted to build a way for us to use a bit of Salesforce in a way that users could interact with during our presentation, just to show some of the functionality that we have at our disposal. So yeah, let's see, there we go. So I'm guessing this group is probably pretty familiar with Wordle, hopefully, but if not, we'll just go into a bit of detail about what Wordle is. So it's a daily word game you can find online. It's fun, simple, similar to a crossword. And estimated 250,000 people play it daily. Again, we built this about 1.5 years ago. I think Wordle was probably at its peak of popularity at the time, and then actually got bought out by the New York Times. So it was originally developed by a guy who's just kind of coming up with a game to have some fun with. So how do you play the game? So you're guessing a 5-letter word. That's the basis for it. And you get 6 opportunities to guess the word correctly. Each time you enter a word, the cells individually for each letter are going to change colors. So if you have the correct letter in the correct place, it'll turn green. If you have a letter that is in the word, but the letter is in the incorrect place, it'll turn yellow. And if the letter is not in the word, it will turn gray. So setting a little bit of baseline, and we'll be jumping back and forth between the PowerPoint and Salesforce. I think this will be an interesting presentation because, as Linda mentioned, I originally demoed this at Buckeye Dreaming, but the crowd there is a little bit different than having developers. So we can actually get into the back end and look at some of the code as well. So we will dig into Salesforce in addition to the PowerPoint. But setting a little bit of the baseline for how we did it, again, you have, you're guessing 5-letter words, and there's 6 opportunities to guess it. So using that grid, that 5x6 grid, we created variables within the flow for each individual cell. And so keeping in mind the 1 through 5 and the A through F is going to help us set the individual values for each cell as letters are guessed. Additionally, we have a 5-letter word custom object. So the name of each record within that object is simply just a 5-letter word. We have 2 additional fields on there that we leverage. One being a checkbox just called solution, which helps us target words that we want to use as solutions in the game. So We have two versions of this that we actually built, and they're pretty similar. Early, we created the initial version, just cloned it out and made a few minor adjustments. But the one version, when we originally did the presentation, we wanted to make sure that the words that were the solution to the puzzle fell in line with the presentation. So we created a version where we actually stipulate what the word is you're trying to solve. And then we additionally created a version where it's just a random word generator. So it's just picking out a word from amongst all of those 5-letter words that have been created. And really, you can keep playing it as many times as you want. Unlike the normal version, you can only play once a day. So this will give you some opportunity to just play it however many times you'd like. So with that, we created the solution checkbox so that we could target words in that random generator that we would actually want to be solutions. That way we could eliminate some of the basic words you use every day, like could, would, should. Actually, should would be 6 letters, but could and would. So that those would not be solutions, but are words that would appear within the game and able to be guessed. And then lastly, we have a date time field for when the word was last used. So for the random word generator, we don't want the same word or words continuously appearing. So this gives us a way to track if the word has been a solution already and sort of push it to the bottom of the pile. So with that, we've created records within that object for basically every 5-letter word we could find, which was done through just going out online and finding a list of 5-letter words and uploading them as unique records within the object. So let's go ahead and play a quick round. So this is what it looks like. This is our baseline. Just looking for some audience participation to guess a 5-letter word.
So feel free to, unmute, add a word, or throw it in the chat. I'm going to hold off adding my word until I give a chance to somebody else.
Just any 5-letter word?
Any 5-letter word.
Not a common one. Like I don't know why these just shows up in my that may be like the coulds or whatever, but
we can start with it if you'd like, though. You got to start somewhere, right?
Show me these.
These. All right, so there's your results. That being that there is an S somewhere in the solution, but it is not the 4th letter. That's all we've got so far. So I'm going to jump back to the PowerPoint. I'll let you guys keep thinking about that a little bit, and we'll kind of bounce back and forth. Stop there. Okay, so a little bit about the flow. So I'm assuming this group is pretty familiar with flow in general, but just to rehash some of the main elements or the building blocks of flow in general, we're going to be using throughout the flow multiple different elements to just represent actions that the flow can execute. We do use assignment elements throughout. That allows us to translate information entered by the user into a format that we can reference again later in the flow. Screen flows are pretty prevalent throughout this process. As you saw, we were operating from a screen, so that's where we're going to collect the information, or in this case, the words that the users are guessing. And then get record elements we'll also use throughout the flow to look at our 5-letter word object and verify that the word you're entering is a legitimate word, and then B, is it the word that we're trying to solve for. Additionally, we use decision elements throughout the flow. So again, each time a word's guessed, we need to evaluate a couple different things. We need to first evaluate if the word that was entered is a legitimate word. If not, we want to produce an error and send you back to that original screen to enter a word again. Secondly, we want to evaluate if the word you guessed was correct. And then thirdly, which ends up being our default outcome within the decision, is if you guessed a legitimate word, but it's not correct, then we're going to move on in the flow and continue to take additional actions. Actions are just simply execute an action as defined in the flow. The only action, and you can kind of see it here, that we reference throughout is actually a toast action, which is a Lightning Web component that's added in so that if you were to guess a word that's not legitimate, we're going to produce an error via a pop-up box using that action. And then additionally, the screen elements. So let's jump over and play another round.
John has a few words written in the chat. He has a few options: sales, shoot, sweet, super, shark. Shark, I will not go with because H has already been used.
Yep. So I'll let you choose. Which one would you like to guess?
Same for shoot and sweet, and super has an E.
Oh man, I'm bad at this game.
I feel like all those have at least a letter in it.
Oh, okay. So,
but you like to play.
No good. Never mind. I'll go back to the drawing board. Sorry.
Anyone else have a guess before I throw out one that I know has no? Savor. Savor is good. Thank you, Crystal.
Savor.
I'd say we go with that. A-O-R.
Yep. Sorry.
Savory. Oh, you found two more. Cool.
Yeah, we got a bit more information. So again, the S is still in the puzzle. Now we know it's neither the first nor fourth letter. And then additionally, R and O are in the puzzle, but they are not in the correct places. So I'm going to jump back to the presentation again. I'll let you all continue to think on that a little bit. Let's jump there. I keep losing my spot. Apologies. There we go. So decision outcomes. So within each decision, we're creating an outcome for each path that the flow can take. Each outcome is evaluated in the order they are listed in the decision element. So that's just flow basics. So for our decision element in particular, that's displayed in the screenshot in the top right. So as you can see on the left-hand side of that, within sort of the gray section for the outcome orders, we have three outcomes. Row 1 is not a valid word. Row 1 is the correct word. Row 1 is the incorrect word. Now, in this case, this is a screenshot specifically from the decision that comes after the first row is input in the game. So at this point, we're specifically evaluating row 1. So again, row 1, if it's not a valid word, we want to display an error message, and we want to send you back to the screen to input an additional word. The second outcome would be if it's correct, then we're just going to display the screen for you that shows that you solved the puzzle. And then the third option, which in our case is the default, is that the word is incorrect, in which case we're going to continue on in the flow. We also use a lot of variables and formulas throughout this flow. So the variables allow us to store a value that can be used or changed throughout the flow. Specifically for input variables, we have 31 of them. 30 of them are the cell inputs. So as I showed on that screen earlier, we have an individual variable for A1, A2, A3, 4, 5, and then additionally 1 through 5 for each subsequent row. Additionally, the 31st variable is the master word. And that is simply the word that we are trying to solve for as the solution for the puzzle. So in our variation where we wanted to stipulate what the word is, we simply go into the flow and we update that variable to set a default value. I'll show you both versions of the flow, but in the random Wordle generator, the first thing we do is allow the flow to go out and capture a word and then use an assignment element to pass that word into the master word variable. There we go. So then additionally, we also have some formulas. So we have 6 formulas for words. We have 1 for all of the words. We have 30 of them for the individual cell colors. And then we have 26 of them for the keyboard colors. We'll look at those more in the flow, but the general idea is, as you can see in the top right screenshot, row 1 word is a formula that concatenates the 5 variables for each cell that were entered in row 1. So that allows us to take each cell and evaluate it individually within the A1 through A5 variables, but also creates a formula for us to look at the word as a whole. Secondly, the second screenshot there is the all words formula, which just concatenates all of those individual word formulas so that we can evaluate what all letters have been guessed, which helps us with the color coding of the keyboard. So this next screen, I know it's got the same text on the left, but a couple new screenshots on the right to look at the formulas for the individual cell colors and the keyboard colors. So the individual cell colors, what we're doing there is evaluating if an individual cell, so in this case, A1, if the variable for A1, whatever letter was guessed in that cell, is in the master word and is in the first location. So that's what the second line of that formula is doing. It's looking at the left side of the master word, grabbing the first letter and evaluating if that is equal to the letter that is captured in our A1 variable. If so, then we're grabbing a hex code to make that color for that cell be equal to green, because that would indicate it's the correct letter in the correct place. If not, and the master word contains the value that was entered in A1, then we're using the hex code C9B428 to indicate that that cell should be yellow, because that would indicate that it was in the puzzle, but in the correct location. And then our else solution for our if formula is the hex code for gray to indicate that the letter that was guessed in that cell is not in the puzzle. Second screenshot there is the keyboard color. So the only thing with the keyboard is it's 2 shades of gray, and there's a darker shade of gray if the letter has been guessed at all in the puzzle, irrespective of whether it's in the correct location or not. It's just to help you make sure that you're not reusing the same letters that you've already guessed. So let's play another round.
So does anyone have a guess? I know there was talk going on, and
I'm not seeing the chat, but I love it. So
there was a suggestion for spooky, which is too many letters than just spook, but we already have something starting with an S. I mean, I have a guess, but I also don't want to solve it early. Or if people really want to go with the word that was suggested, we could, but we already know it's going to get us 2 that are just, there, but not in the right place.
Yeah, maybe we do another guess that we know could be wrong, but eliminate some more letters. But I'm having a hard time.
You absolutely can. Sometimes it's good strategy, right?
Yeah. THEA. So spook, that would give us a P and a K. Give us feedback on those letters.
You could also figure out if the O is the third letter.
Oh.
So there is a third thing in there. But that's up to you.
Moose.
Moose, is that what I heard?
Moose, ooh. Yeah, is that you said, Orlando? Moose?
Yeah.
Do you want to do moose or do you want to do mouse? Let's just throw that out there for fun.
That gives us more options, right?
Or Morse, like as in Morse code, so we have another place to eliminate the R.
Good thing. This is good. This is some good.
I love the strategy.
Yeah.
Oh, but we have used E in the past, and it's not part of the word, is it?
It's not, but that doesn't.
Yeah, maybe sacrificial.
It just doesn't buy us a piece of information, but we'd be able to potentially eliminate spaces for 2 letters. One we already know is not in the right location.
Moors, like Scottish Moors, would give us more information without reusing the E.
That's good. So.
Ooh.
What is that word? I'm sorry.
Moors, Moors.
Oh, okay. Is that what we want to go with?
I say we try it.
Yeah, that's good.
We got some green.
All
We're
right.
on board.
So we now know there's no M in the puzzle, R and O. Well, O is the second letter. So a little bit of a caveat here. The version we set up, I think we actually do in a slight variation of rules from the standard one. And that rule being specifically related to double letters. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a hint just because this is the one where I had put in a master word, so I know what the solution is. The only O that's in the puzzle is the second letter. This one is simply yellow because of that one.
Same for the S.
Well, yeah, so the S is the last letter. That one's correct. So O will be the second letter, S will be the last letter, and then R, theoretically, since we've guessed fifth and fourth, it would be either the third or the first letter. So I will jump back to the presentation here again. You guys can continue to think. Give you some time on that. So a bit about the Lightning Web Components. So we have really 4 components that we're using throughout this. And it's, as you can probably see, it's more about the visual of the screen flow itself. So standard flows, I believe, are limited to, I think, 4 columns, maybe 3. I actually don't remember that offhand, but we needed the ability to have 5 columns, and we wanted to do a little bit of formatting around their appearance. So 3 of these are going to be very similar to each other in that we have a placeholder component, which simply just generates those empty cells for the subsequent rows we haven't guessed yet, just so that we have the visual of all the boxes being on the screen, but those are not available for entry, nor do they have a value displayed in them. We also have a variation of that for the input, which is always just going to be the row that we're working on at a given time. That allows us to actually enter the individual letters in. And then we have our output component, which is the prior rows that we've already guessed. So that one has some fun complexity in the component itself, because that's where in the flow, we're generating the formulas to dictate the cell colors. And then we're actually passing those into the Lightning Web component so that it can display the proper letters in the proper locations with the proper colors for the rows that we've already guessed. And then the fourth one being the keyboard itself, which is also a little bit of fun because we had to design it in a way that allows us to actually enter or display the letters according to an actual keyboard format rather than just entering them A through Z. So those are the 4 Lightning Web components. We'll look at those a bit more once we get into the back end of Salesforce. So let's play another round. I feel like you guys are getting there. Might be this round, maybe.
Anyone have a guess? Because I have one. Like, I really do.
Go for it, Lynn. Stop teasing us.
So,
Yeah.
roads, like ROADS.
Ooh.
Roads.
Oh, man.
And closer. No A or D, but R is the first letter.
Roads. I thought we were in it.
So I'm going to let us just keep going this time, see if we can solve it. We got 2 more opportunities here.
Roses? Oh, no.
Well, we
No.
know we can't have 2 S's. We have RO something something and S, and it has to be letters we haven't used yet. So ones that are still kind of gray on that.
The gray, okay. The gray.
Yeah, so the dark gray would be the ones that have already been guessed. Light gray would be letters you haven't used.
It's interesting. I'm like not looking at that little keyboard area that's showing me what not to use. I like refuse to look at it for some reason. But now that you draw my, it's very helpful. Okay.
And how about rocks?
ROCKS. Is that what
Yeah.
you said?
I was thinking about it. Yeah.
You're a winner. Cleveland Rocks. That was my thought.
Oh man.
Linda
So-
rocks.
So as you can see, the screen that appears once you get it right just takes the keyboard away and shows you the result, and everything's green. Nice job, Linda.
So we got it in 5, you know.
Too bad.
I'm trying to remember what the message is that regular Wordle gives you, because it's if you takes all 6, it gives you like a few message.
Yeah, it gives you, like, phew, like finally figured it out in 6 or something like
Or
that.
you did it just like in the nick of time.
Yeah. I think there's a separate message that comes up with each row. Maybe we should incorporate that with some toast messages. That's a good idea.
Yeah.
But yeah, the UI is impressive. I was like, how is he doing it?
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you enjoy it. So yeah, we can go take a look at the flow here and see what this looks like. Again, there's 2 versions of the flow, and we'll actually come back. We can play a few more, but right now we're looking at the version where I specifically chose what the word would be. So if I open our toolbox and I look for master word, you can see there I set a default value of rocks. So that's the word we're trying to solve in this particular flow. And then here's what the flow looks like in a bit more detail. So initial screen, we've just pulled in various web components. So on row 1, we need to input values. So we're using our input component. Rows 2 through 6 are using the same placeholder component for each, and then our keyboard down below. With our input row, we do have the attributes within the Lightning Web Component that we can reference, but we actually use that more for the output values so that we can pass into it what letter to display where and what color each of those letters should be. And then same with the keyboard. We have an attribute for each letter where we can pass in what the keyboard color should be. Again, these are formulas, so those will change as letters are guessed. So the first thing we do after that screen 1 is we take the value from each cell that you've entered and pass it into our corresponding variables for A1 through A5. Again, those are used in the formula for the row 1 word. So it helps us figure out what word as a whole you actually guessed. Then we're going to do a get record element. So what we're doing here is we're going out to our 5-letter word object, and we're trying to find a letter or a word within that object where the name of the word is equal to the row 1 word that you have guessed. There should only be one, so we just stored the first record. Then we go to our decision element. So what we're doing here, again, is the first row. We're evaluating if what you entered in row 1 is actually a legitimate word. And that's why we needed the get record element. So we are looking at that get record element itself and verifying if it's null or not. If it is null, that means the word you entered was not found within our 5-letter words and therefore is not a valid word. If it's not null, then that's fine. We'll figure out whether it's the correct word or not next, but that at least tells us that it's a valid word to guess. So assuming it was a valid word, we would evaluate right now if the word that you entered is equal to the master word. If so, you solve the puzzle on row 1. So that's going to give us one path to go down in that case. And then again, our default outcome is the only other scenario that applies at this point, and that is that the word you guessed on row 1 is a valid word, but it is not the correct answer. So coming out of that decision element, each outcome, if it's not a valid word, that's where we're executing this action, which is a toast message. I believe you can actually download this from Unofficial SF. Very helpful Lightning Web Component. I use this all the time. It actually can display error messages, successes, warnings. You can customize what message is displayed. So it keeps in line with standard Salesforce functionality in terms of popping up that message at the top of the screen. You can also control the duration that it appears there and a little bit of the dismissible mode. So If you were to guess the incorrect word, we pop up a red icon with an error that says the word is not a valid word, and then return you to screen 1, which would take you right back here to then re-enter another word. If you were to solve the puzzle, we're going to take you to this screen element, which gives us an output display to display all of your letters again, as well as the colors, in which case they would all be green. And then we keep the additional rows as placeholders because we no longer need to enter any additional words, and we do not display the keyboard anymore. The third option is if you were to guess the incorrect word. So if we go that route, row 1 now becomes our output display, where we're simply, again, going to display the letters that you guessed on that prior row, along with each of their individual colors. Row 2 becomes our input. So now we got to give you the option to input additional letters into row 2. Rows 3 through 6 become placeholders, and we continue to display our keyboard. From there, it's just a repetition of that same process all the way down the page through each row. So either you're going to solve it, or ultimately we're going to get to the end of the flow. And if we get to the end and you were to be incorrect, we would use the action again to show you a message with the master word. We use the info icon in this case to show you what the solution to the puzzle was, and take you to a screen that would display that information, or to display the guesses that you had made all the way through row 6. So that is the gist of the flow. You can also look at the Lightning Web Components. Since we're in the developer group here, I'm sure you guys are a bit interested in this. I'm not going to talk through all of these because this can be a bit long in some areas, but I'll pull them up individually and let you guys just kind of take a peek at it. And if you have any questions, let me know. So this is the placeholder component. So this is the one that's just helping us devise the individual boxes to store blank tiles on the screen. So not a whole lot to that. We're just formatting it in the way we wanted those tiles to appear. The input component, it's a bit more complex. So we have attributes for each of the values that we're inputting. We have a lot of formatting around those as to how we want them to appear, how we want the cell to appear, so forth. We also have some controller information. Now, I will say I am not the most well-versed on this controller. This is actually where we had a developer on our team help out a little bit. A couple things that we wanted to include in the functionality to keep it consistent with the Wordle game was that we wanted to be able to just simply enter one letter and it take you to the next cell. So standard Salesforce functionality, if we use just text boxes, would have just kept me in the first cell after entering a letter. We want it to automatically move on. So that gets included in here. We also want to capitalize all the letters. So that's included in here as well. These are just our attributes for our input. So again, we need to know the value that goes into each cell and create a variable for those. And then the output. Again, this one's pretty complex, but fairly similar in that we're doing a lot of just formatting of the cell itself. But we have attributes for both the value and the color. So this is where we ended up creating those values so that when we're displaying the output on a screen, we can pass the variables into it from the flow to not only tell it what letter to display, but what color that letter's cell should be on the screen.
So Doug, I kind of have the same question. So I'm noticing you're displaying as Aura components, not Lightning Web components. Is there a reason Aura components were used?
Not offhand, no.
I mean, other than it's easier to display because otherwise you have to go to VS Code to display stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I think it was just a matter of whatever we found to be easiest. To be honest, I was kind of working my way through this, learning a little bit of development myself along the way. Again, I'm a architect by nature. I don't get into too much coding typically. So just trying to find a solution that fit for us.
Nice.
Let's see. And then lastly is the keyboard. Where'd that go? There we go. And so on the component, we've got the attributes, and then we've also got the classes that help us actually display the keyboard according to the actual standard keyboard format. And then design component for the individual letters, which again, we're passing colors into because it's dependent on whether you've guessed the letter yet or not.
Cool. And I see there's a unique identifier for each of the keys, letter A, keyboard color. I didn't notice that for the 5 space grid for the word, that how uniquely identify each of those.
For the output,
Yeah.
so for the words you've already guessed, yeah, I may need to scroll over a little bit. So that's over here in the styling of each cell. So in the output component, sorry, the share screen is a little in my way. So in the output component, we're displaying each text box for. So let's use an example, right? So if I'm on screen 2 to now enter the second word, this output component would be used on row 1 to show which word I had already guessed. And so with that, we need to pass in the 5 letters that you had guessed on the prior row. And so with the formatting of those, part of what we're passing in is over here. We're styling those with a background color, and that is using our variable that we're passing into this component
Gotcha.
from.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I know that was a little off screen there.
I'm also going to point out, just to handle Ganasundari's question, as someone who's more comfortable in OR components still and still struggling to learn LWCs, I feel like the need to pass a lot of variables in and out through this process, OR component, makes a lot of sense for people who haven't gotten used to how to do that in an LWC yet.
So let me ask you then, Lindo, because again, I'm not a developer. So is there a much easier way to do this in Lightning Web Components? Is that what you're saying?
It's going to be shorter code when you get there, and the way you pass attributes in is a slightly differently because it actually lives in your metadata XML file rather than within the HTML or the JavaScript file. And I'm trying to remember how much you have to then also put in the JavaScript file for it, and I'm not remembering off the top of my head.
Well, I love the feedback though, because
it would be so. I mean, things that I see, like it would be really interesting to see it also built with the LWC to have that comparison.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of simpler ways to potentially do this. The other thing I would mention, even with just the flow itself, there may even have been ways in there to simplify things at this point, because we built this a year and a half ago, and with Salesforce continuing to do releases and bring out new features, I'm sure this can continue to be improved upon.
Well, and there's
if it was a practical use case to use every day, right?
There's more control for multiple columns now, plus the new reactive components would be really interesting for this.
Yeah.
So I will encourage everyone, if you feel adventurous, build your own. I mean, I'm sure I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of variation as people try different things.
Yeah, find what works for you. Something that also came up, I think, at Buckeye Dreamin' was having like a master word still, but allowing somebody to maybe go in like each day or a couple days in advance and dictating what the word would be for a given day. And there would be, I'm sure, ways to do that as well. If you wanted to store those in advance so that you could kind of queue them up and choose the words yourselves, but not have to go into the flow to put it as a default value. A lot of different ways to do these things. That's the fun of it, right? So I just want to show this flow as well. This is the random world generator, and we'll go back to this one and we can play this a few more times. But the main difference here is that on our original flow, again, that master word, sorry, my screen's slowing down a little bit. that master word was dictated as a default value. So when we started the flow, we immediately went to the screen. In our random version, we actually go out and do a get record element first to go capture a word. Again, we had specifically targeted words within all of the 5-letter word records that could be solutions. So we're looking for one where solution equals true. We sort it ascending by last modified date, capture the first record. And then and actually I think that should be last used date should be my sorting now that I look at this, but then we're updating the last used date on that word to be today's date so that we can push it to the bottom of the pile. And then at that point, we take an assignment element and assign the word that we captured into the master word variable. Then from there, everything picks up the same as that other flow. So with that, we can do a few more runs at this if you guys like to have a little more fun. So this is the random version. It's going to go pick out words for us. In this scenario, I have no idea what the word's going to be.
Yeah,
So before we play, just anybody else have any other questions about the flow, about the components that were used in here? Anything else? Just want to give the chance for that before we spend a lot of time playing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. The other thing I'll mention while you all are thinking is that we created an app specific for the Wordle with a couple of app pages where we just drop the screen flows onto the page. So that's the way we chose to display them. I mean, you could, do a global action. You could have a tab, you could put it on a home page, right? It's a screen flow. So in terms of where you display it and how you make it accessible would really be up to you.
Not seeing any questions. So sad. All right. So does anyone have a favorite starting word? Is it always a 5 when we play the game online? Yes, it is a 5-letter word game. That was kind of the design for main Wordle. There are some variations though out there online. I have not really tried them because I don't have enough time to play other games. I just try this one when I have time. Maz and match. That's.
What was the word? I'm sorry.
She has Maz and match. I say we start with match.
Match.
Ooh. We have one letter in correct place. So we have a C in the correct place, the 4th letter, and we have an A that goes somewhere else. So that doesn't work with my usual starting word.
I'll tell you, funny, while you guys are thinking, just a funny thing is, given that this is Salesforce, right? When I did this presentation one time and had the master word set up, I just made it force. And somebody literally came out and guessed it on the first line. We just ended the game right there. That was fun.
We got a C in here. C in the right place too. Okay.
You've got to guess for space. That looks good to me as a next word.
Nice.
Oh, and now we've got 3 letters. So
Whoa.
and 1. So we know the first letter's got to be P.
Yep.
So how many different words are there?
Place. Did we use L yet?
Well, we also know that we don't have duplicated letters, right?
You could have duplicated letters.
Okay, in this one. So we have guesses of both piece and place.
Oh, yeah. Either would potentially work. Is there a preference on which one to start with?
So I feel like 2 people guessed piece, so we should start with piece.
All right. There it is.
And we got it.
Yeah. Yep.
Boom.
Yeah. So you didn't get that extra clue with the E because the first time you guessed it, it was in the correct place. So yeah, those are the ones that I think throw you off on the daily version too, right?
Anything with repeating letters or where
Just-
they've appropriated foreign words. Those are my other favorites. But very good. 3.
Yeah.
That's awesome, guys.
All right. Well, that is, and we can play again if you'd like, but that is it for the presentation for today.
So I've turned